So I'm Rob Hall. I'm a lecturer in the Molecular and Cell Biology department. I teach a large human physiology lecture course for non-majors, and last fall I taught my students about stereotype threat, and I'm going to tell you about how I did that and what their response was to it. So first off, what is stereotype threat? Maybe some of you don't know what that is. It was first an idea originally proposed by Claude Steele, a psychology professor here, and he was interested in studying why some students underperform in academic settings. So I'm just going to talk you through an example here as an illustration. So there's a negative stereotype about women in math. They're not able to do well in math. And so what they did was they took college students who had performed equally well on the SAT, so they had similar abilities, and they gave them a very challenging math test. And they told them, this is a test of your mathematical abilities. And you can see that the women performed about half as well as the men did under those circumstances. Then if you repeat the experiment with another group of students who also have similar abilities, and this time you tell them this is a test of your problem-solving abilities, rather than this is the mathematical abilities, then you can see that the women do equally well as the men, even though it's the exact same test, exact same questions. So what is going on here? So we think that when there's a negative stereotype about and you're in that situation, you're thinking about that and you really want to overcome that and do better than the stereotype. And that produces a lot of stress response in your body. And so you release this hormone that's called cortisol into the blood. And when you have high cortisol levels, that's been shown to impair memory and to decrease your performance. So we think that in this condition where we told them it was a test of mathematical abilities, they were feeling that stereotype and they wanted to overcome it, and they had high stress, high cortisol, and that impaired their performance. So what can we do about this besides just reframing the types of tests that we give? Well, it turns out that you can teach students about stereotype threat and then give them that same test of the mathematical abilities, and it decreases the impairment. It makes it so that the women perform just as well as the men did, just knowing what stereotype threat is. So I wanted to do this for my students in my class. So again, this is MCV 32. It's a lower division, large class of about 300 students. Many of these students are first-year students. This is their first science class. And so I'm going to talk to them about stereotype threat, but I wanted to do it in kind of a sneaky way. So I decided to do this by talking about the endocrine system. This is the system that involves all your hormones. So I just did the normal lecture, talked about the organs and hormone signaling. We talked about the cortisol pathway, which is a very common pathway to talk about in human physiology. I talked about what happens if you have long-term stress and you have high cortisol levels, how that impairs memory. And so then from here you can see it's very easy just to segue into stereotype threat. So I talked about the stereotype threat, I showed them that same graph, and also a bunch of other examples too. So every single group has a negative stereotype about them in one way or another. It could be an academic setting, it could be in athletics, or emotional reasoning, or whatever. So everyone has had stereotype threat, but just maybe you didn't realize it. So I told them about that, and we talked about ways that they can deal with this. One, of course, is just learning about it. So what did the students think about this? I gave them a questionnaire before and after, teaching them about stereotype threat. And the first question I asked before was, have you heard of the term stereotype threat before? And you can see that many of the students had not. So this is an important subject to talk about in all of our classes. Afterwards, I just asked, do you understand what stereotype threat is now? And many of them agreed with that. I didn't actually test if they know it, but at least they've heard the term and are starting to think about how maybe it's affected their life and their performance. Another question that I asked beforehand was this, whether they agreed with this statement, that discussions about society have no place in a biology course. And I was surprised that actually most of the students disagreed with this statement. So this was news to me. I think a lot of people in the MCB department think that a lot of our students are pre-med and they're just there for the grade, learn for the MCATs and they're going to get out of there. But it turns out that they do want to talk about science and society in that intersection and have that discussion. So that was important for me to hear. I can talk about stereotype threat and I don't have to kind of like trick my way into it by cortisol. It would be appropriate to talk about at any time in the course. And then afterwards, I asked them, do you appreciate learning about stereotype threat in a human physiology course? And they did. Right, so I will definitely continue to teach this subject in all my classes, and I encourage you to do the same. I think the students are very receptive to this and very appreciative of learning about stereotype threat. So that's it.